got her all sanded. One of the problems with varnishing is every time you wipe the boat down, you're introducing a charge to the surface. So what happens is, you know, the first coat you put on, you're feeling kind of casual, you really don't know what to expect yet. So you work through that, you're going to figure out a few of the tips that you use on the second. And then by the third one, you know, you're getting pretty cocky and it goes on beautiful. And then you prep for the fourth coat and you spend too much time wiping it down and you get that surface so charged up that it's drawing dust out of all over the farm. So you know, you're trying to be conscientious doing that extra little step so it's going to be dust free and you've kind of backed things up. It's important that the varnish has an ultraviolet inhibitor, and the reason for that is the only thing that really attacks the epoxy is ultraviolet light. So the way this works is this, the epoxy manufacturer says you need 12% protection. This varnish is 3% per coat. Now, I really don't know what those numbers are or what they're based on, but I just think 3 times 4 is 12. So I would suggest 4 coats, you know, to get the amount of filtering that's going to keep the epoxy safe. When you store your boat, it's a really good idea to put it out of the sun, because you know that the sun is going to be the hardest on it. It's going to be harder on it than cardtop or port dashing or anything. I would begin by sealing up the gunnels. So that would be thin down varnish that would soak in. From gluing up the decks, we know that this end grain is really thirsty. So these ends of these decks, I would just keep feeding it in until it stays shiny. If you look at old boats, you often see splits in here. You know, it's because the moisture got in that end grain, swells it up, then it dries quick, and it just eventually tears itself apart. So do what you can to soak up that end grain. Your boat's going to age a whole lot better than if you hadn't done. The varnish that we use here has a real high solids content. So the varnish in that can is so thick, you got to do something to it before you can brush it. You buy a cheap varnish and you can brush that right out of the can, because what you're doing is buying a lot of solvents already in your can. The beauty of this is you can tailor the varnish for what you're doing. So you put that sealer on and then sand at 220. We've been using these scuffing pads for a while with really good success. So this is kind of a commercial grade Scotch-Brite. So it's abrasive. It's perfect for edges like this. If I wrap my sandpaper around here, it's probably going to hit there, and maybe it's hits there. So you're not cutting that down evenly, just because the paper is not going to wrap around that curve evenly. But the corners are the part that get beat up first, so it's the corners that you want to get the most material on. So this stuff here wraps around that, and that scuffs it up just like a baby's bum. It's quite aggressive, but it's a perfect way for doing edges. So I would go over with this sandpaper first, that would get a lot of it. Then I'd come back with this, and this would cut the rest of the gloss that was left behind. It would make these edges soft, so they have a, I guess a feel like it's 100 years old, but well taken care of. You know, it's aged gracefully. It just feels nice. I would suggest that you use a water-dampened rag to pick up the dust. So, first of all, you know, paint thinner, like the lacquer thinner, everything that's in that can is going to end up in your air. So no point in exposing yourself if you don't have to. Plus the water, it holds the dust to the rag, but it's also taking the charge out of the surface. Wetting the floor down will help to reduce that static. In terms of brushes, I've had really good luck with these polyester, I think, from Home Depot. The reason I like it, you know, we've used the $40, $50 badger hair brushes in the past, handmade, so the bristles all curve into the middle. Beautiful, but they're probably twice thick as this. They hold a lot of material, and the end is so fat. Like it's great for open areas because you get half a pint in that brush and it just keeps feeding it out. You know, unlike the epoxy. Remember the epoxy? The usable part was around the outside of the brush. Well, with the varnish or paint, the usable is inside and it just feeds out as you brush it on. So they were so bulky, you know, that you couldn't cut into corners without smearing it all over the place. So these seem to hold the edge really well. You know, I find that after you wash them out, if you put them back in the package, it helps to keep those bristles formed the way they should be. So these have been good. Also, so trim 1 inch is ideal. You know, that's a good size for here. On the outside of the hull, you could consider using a roller. So these rollers here are the ones that you would use if you were rolling the epoxy on. So the foam is really thin, so it doesn't hold a lot of materials, but it also doesn't hold a lot of air. If you get a thick foam or a pile, it gets so much air in it. Fine if you're painting your house, but we don't want to put the air in here because we don't want to roll it on, and it's going to leave a bit of a stippled surface to it. So then go over that and just smooth it. Use the foam brush. So I would suggest, you know, you always do your best. Don't beat yourself up if you're not happy with it. Take it out, scratch it up, and try it again next year.